Welcome back from the break. We are still interrogating the proposed budget framework paper for financial year 2023, 2022-2023, and we are looking at the hits and the misses. With me, I have two gentlemen. One is an economist, and another one is a journalist, but who is really done a lot of covering around issues with the national budget in Parliament. I have Ineliona, who is an economist from Civil Society Budget and Democracy Group, but also with me I have Moses Molon, who is the president of Uganda Parliamentary Press Association, and also a writer with New Vision, one of the leading dailies. Before we broke off, the two gentlemen had actually laid bare of what it is entailed in the proposed budgets, and now let's go to the specifics. And I want to pick it from the point of supplementary budgets because I think there's a very big concern there. I remember very well somewhere last year, I've had the 3 months into the current financial year. Another supplementary budget of 3.8 trillion was presented. Again, last week, another supplementary budget of 4.7 trillion was presented. Looks like it's becoming a practice for government to always present supplementary budgets. And let me start with you, Moses. What explains this appetite, this penchant for supplementary budgets? Is it a problem of our planning? Is there something we don't know? Moses, I can't hear you. I think you're muted. Unmute.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, proceed.
Okay, actually in the minority report from the opposition, which was authored by Mwanga Chivumbi, John Baptist Nambeshe, and Goreti Namuga from Zimbabwe. I talked about their concern on capital flight, but their other major concern was actually on the supplementary budget. And their recommendation on that particular issue was actually even adopted by the whole House. Some of their recommendations were adopted, and that is one of them. The supplementary budgets actually are in contravention of what the Public Finance Management Act states, because they are supposed to be unforeseeable. But increasingly, yes, but increasingly we have been seeing actually most of them are foreseeable, and some because now, like for that 3.80 trillion which was approved in November last year, the bulk of it went to security, State House, and I remember still the biggest portion, more than $1 trillion, was to classified expenditure. So that is a very major concern. We hope, since Parliament last week adopted the recommendation from the opposition for government to minimize supplementary budgets, I hope some action will be taken, because it's a form of budgeting discipline. Like for example, for State House, for the last financial year, the initial budget of State House was in the range of 400 billion. But at the end of the financial year, because of supplementary budgets, it was close to $1 trillion shillings. So it means that the State House budget increased 2 times. It's unimaginable, but that is what happened. And of course, like you said, it points to poor planning. We hope, since Parliament has taken a decision on that, government will undertake some action to reduce it. I remember seeing the new Secretary to the Treasury go be promising that he would do something to ensure that he minimizes supplementary budgets. And but I also was in a recent meeting where the former Secretary to the Treasury, Mahakanis, was saying that the technocrats in the Ministry of Finance should not be blamed for the indiscipline in supplementary budgets, but their bosses, the political leaders, are responsible for that. So I hope, as because the budgeting process is still on, around the March 15th, government will be getting back to Parliament with budget policy statements, and around April, they will be getting back to Parliament with the revised budget estimates. That is around that time, at the beginning of April, is when we even hope to see any tax measures that government will be introducing for the next financial year. So the budgeting process is still on. That's what I have to say on that particular issue of supplementary budget.
Your platforms, send in your questions, your comments. They'll flash the social media accounts on below the screen so that you can be part of it. And any question, any comment, we'll be very glad to attend to it. Let me come to you, Ainedu, and you. Specific question to you. You may comment on the other one, but there's one which I want you to really rein in. The issue around the 43 trillion, which was approved, when I look at it closely and I look at the way it has been cut, you are seeing that 15.6 trillion is earmarked for debt repayment. Then you have about 5.5 for the wage bill. Yet revenue collections that are projected are stand at around 21.1 trillion. So I think around 25 trillion.
25.5.
25 trillion, yes.
Yes.
When you make the mathematics and you add, you correct me if I'm wrong, it leaves a balance of about only 4.4 trillion. Help me understand how this can run the other remaining parts of the National Development Plan priorities. 3, how does this support government expenditure? Because for me, the mathematics doesn't add up.
Thank you very much, Felix. You're right. There's no need for any mathematics there. It's actually right. Maybe a small comment on supplementary budgeting. This is a thorn in our advocacy agenda, really. Felix, what Ugandans have to know is that the law actually does provide for supplementary budgeting. And a good budget, of course, should have a supplementary in place. Like I'd mentioned earlier, even a contingencies fund. It's part of this, really. But this supplementary budget, actually, the PFMA Act was revised and removed quite a number of those conditions of the unforeseeable, unavoidable. Those stayed in the Public Finance Management Regulations of 2016, not the Act, regulations. But no regulations, of course, guide the Act, So in the regulations, it was guided that at least these had to be of some sort of unforeseeable, unavoidable, unabsorbable nature. Things that you haven't planned for. Of course, you can't be planning now for salaries, really. You can't come and ask for supplementary and you have salaries in there. You have vehicles, you have travel abroad, things that at least a very good planning unit can foresee, and can avoid, So with this in mind, and the former PS, in a way, I agree with him, some of these things are actually politically driven and the technocrats don't have much to do in some of these processes. If you look at the current one, I had the chance to scrutinize it very, very, very deeply. You'll find about 800 billion of that, to be exact, 866, in my opinion, does not qualify for supplementary. This is an example. I picked one example from there. I saw the Ministry of ICT asking for about 90 million for allowances for communication task team for 90 days. An allowance in a supplementary. Really, those are very small things, but cumulatively they will affect what you just asked. That's why I wanted to use this as the basis of the question that you just asked. In the money that we have, what structures do we have in place to see that it works really well? Efficiently, I use the word allocative efficiency, that what you have allocated to that you have planned in your plans, in your NDP3. Okay? So this is something that we have learned over time, that MDAs, intelligent MDAs, usually will plan, leave out the critical things. For example, we love to use the example, for example, UNEB. If UNEB did a budget and left out the component of marking exams, the allowances of marking maybe teacher exams, they would come to the floor of Parliament and cause a start. Parliament would not be settled looking for the money for marking exams. Why? Because it's critical. So some of these we have come to learn are done intentionally because they know they will receive them nevertheless. So it's an indiscipline and greatly undermines, of course, the planning and budgeting process. Quickly, to get back to your question, yes, I agree with you 100%. The math doesn't add up. Like I said, this is something that we continually kept on saying, that let's be careful on how we manage our projects, because most of that debt that we acquire, we take it to projects. I've had a chance to look and review at how most of the projects have performed. And for the first time, the Ministry of Finance has been very keen to throw out about 17 projects. According to them, they're not performing. They have been stunned. They have said these projects have exceeded their time. They're not bringing in any money. And with the money we've dispersed so far, we don't see any returns, sizable returns. And as such, they have taken them out. That's a very good move to begin with. But you're contracting debts to finance projects that you're not fully assessing. You have project managers who underperform. Sometimes it's beyond them, but for most of them, they can control the circumstances. But you leave them, you promote them. There's no mechanism right now of a project manager, when they fail to hit their targets, that this will be done clearly to them. You see? So whereas that is in place, the debt is accumulating. And now we've started paying on the principal. We're no longer just paying on the interest payments. We've started committing to the principal. That's what has now chewed a big part of the budget now. The revenue question is also not going up. Yes, you put out and you launched a domestic revenue mobilization strategy, a very good one. I've had a chance to look at it. But right now, there's no implementation plan of, maybe in this year, this is what we are going to do. This is what we are targeting. These are the areas we intend to target. And you consult widely that the taxes you'll bring will not be bad taxes. So all these are discussions. If you put the math together with what they are bringing, yes, it doesn't add up, Felix.
They are saying that supplementary budgets are a major avenue for misusing public funds. Indeed. Moses, let me bring you in here on, there's a question around governance and security, which is, there's an allocation of about 6.4 trillion. And when you talk about governance and security, we are talking about all these classified votes, defense, state house, ESO. There is a word on the streets that this is a conduit for siphoning money. And give us your take, because in there, do we have hidden costs?
Of course, even the opposition leaders in parliament, there have been several times they have raised a red flag on this issue of classified budgets, because these classified budgets have been very huge, even before UPDF went to Congo recently, even when we didn't have any kind of war that within the country or anywhere. Because for Somalia, it's the UN and other development partners that fund the operations of UPDF there. So that's why many have been suspecting that perhaps this is a conduit that government uses, because for classified expenditures, our viewers who may not know, this is money that you're not supposed to ask what it is going to do. It is closed. The details are closed. So and it has been increasing. About 5 years ago, it was about 300 billions, and right now, in the last financial year, it was about 3.80 trillion. So that is a very major concern. Felix, you talked about NDP 3. Even when you look at NDP 3, the allocation to the security program, actually, even the budget committee of parliament raised it, that security is getting more than what it is supposed to get according to the targets that we are set in NDP 3. And by the way, I have remembered I have to talk about this. It's very important. The latest report of the Auditor General, which was presented to Parliament this week, indicates that in the budget for the last financial year, the national budget was aligned to NDP 3 targets by about only 53%. And the major concern was that government is not allocating enough resources to the production sectors, the growth sectors that have a high economic returns, like tourism, like industry, like ICT, like agriculture. For example, for tourism, which actually is a leading contributor to our foreign exchange earning, it has been allocated only 181 billions. And Uganda Tourism Board, by the way, their budget was cut. It had reached 33 billion. It was cut to 16 billions. In East Africa, Rwanda injects about $40 million in marketing their tourism globally. Uganda puts in only $2 million. Kenya puts in more than $20 million. So, and yet we have more tourism attractions than all these countries surrounding us, by the way. Because according to so many international agencies like Lonely Planet, CNN, Rough Guides, they have all released reports indicating that Uganda is among the 5 top tourism destinations in the world because of having outstanding tourism attractions. But when it comes to the actual number of tourists coming in, the numbers are still very, very low because we are not putting in enough in marketing our tourism globally. We are just putting in just $2 million. So this is a very major concern, even from the people within the National Planning Authority. They are greatly concerned that the budget is not aligned to the NDP3 targets. And that was the same concern, by the way, for NDP2. Still NDP2, the national budgets were not aligned, fully aligned to the targets in NDP3 and NDP2. And that is why most of the targets that were set were not realized. Like on the issue of poverty, government had planned to reduce poverty from 19% to 14% in NDP2. But at the end of the NDP2 period, instead poverty had increased to about 22%. So that is a very major concern, that sectors that have a high rate of return on money invested, government continues to allocate them very meager resources. Even ICT is a sector that has potential to create so many jobs, to turn around the economy, but government continues to allocate it very meager, a very small budget, and but also you remember the excise duty on internet data of 12%, which has actually made our internet to be the most expensive in Africa. In the whole of Africa, it's only Uganda and Zambia that have introduced taxes that limit access to internet. When OTT was introduced, access to internet in Uganda reduced from 47% to only 33%, and the excise duty on internet data has worsened the situation. So, and yet in NDP3, this is one of the key sectors that were pointed out that where government would have to inject a lot and turn around the economy. But it's unfortunate that government continues to pay lip service to that sector. The resources allocated to it are very meager, but also introduces taxes that are actually stifling the growth of that sector of ICT.
Patra, can you unmute me? All right. Great. Let me come to you, Ainevion, and probably you have a comment on that, because the same things Moses was raising as I had my concerns and reservations, which partly formed the question around where government priorities are. There's a direct mismatch between when government says it's intent on creating jobs, addressing poverty, addressing unemployment, and when, because the sectors that ideally would address that, which they even talk about, like ICT sector, tourism, agriculture, you don't see that translating into the priorities in terms of allocation to grow the economy, to grow the sector. But in a minute or two, you comment on that. But my other last question, because we have little time remaining, under 5 minutes. There's something around when you look at the same program-based budget, where you have the allocation to human capital development at around 6.9 trillion, which is actually a reduction from 8 trillion in the current financial year, which is the same area that covers education and health. you don't seem to see government prioritizing investing in its people, in investing in the social sectors that are actually the drivers of talking about the middle income, growing the income to growing that the people into the middle income, taking them into the middle income. You don't seem to see that. So where is government putting these priorities? When you look at the way the language it uses and the allocations that follow the language, is this just a mere political talk?
Thank you very much, Felix. You've asked a very, very brilliant question. That's a very, very good question. Felix, that's a question we always ask. I began, and this I did intentionally, I began by showing you the strategic focus, for example. If you look at the NDP3 theme, it's about increasing household incomes, really. It's bringing money. It's whatever planning that we do, ultimately, it should focus down to someone's pockets down there. I've showed you quite a number of expenditures that we went through as a country, out of pocket and, and the like. The theme for this budget for the first time has been changed. The previous budgets had a similar theme to the one of the NDP3. This one was very particular, and I know the current PSST had a lot to do with it. He's very keen. He believes his mantra, I think, is economics that works. Something I believe in so much. The current one, if I recall, is full monetization of the Ugandan economy through commercial agriculture. Mark my words. In my opinion, that should have been the first one in the budget to begin with. Agro-industrialization should have been up. Industrialization, market access, all these are even within the industrialization component. And the digital transformation that Moses has just talked about. The economy that we are in, you saw we went online almost. The companies that have been working through online that have harnessed that opportunity have made a lot of money. Somehow everyone, even my grandmother in the village, now you can engage her online almost. Something we didn't think of many years ago. So having that in a theme well stipulated, because he broke it down, that's why he said he's keen on having this put through. When you now go down, like you've asked, with that theme, I would expect agro-industrialization to be up. What's the percentage of people in the subsistence economy? About 39%. How many people are employed in the agriculture sector? So as the planning unit, that means you should be targeting those, not the minority. Sectors like Moses has talked about tourism. If you look at the allocations to tourism, they have reduced tremendously. And like he has rightly put, we have attractions unlike any other country within East Africa. We have about, I think, close to 52% and above of arable land in East Africa. Ideally, we're supposed to be a food basket. So in my opinion, these are things that we don't even have to invest so much in. Somehow God has been good to us. Most of agriculture is rain-fed. So those are very, very low-hanging fruits as a planning unit to consider that, yes, this is what we have agreed to move by. Can we see it in the plans? I mentioned something about what we call allocative efficiency. And the budget committee did raise this in terms of, when they're analyzing this, they look at what the NDP3 had set out in a particular year of implementation versus what that annual budget has done. Ideally, at least, it shouldn't be so far. But now we can understand a tragedy befell us, something that we had not considered. And as such, this, of course, affected how we were planning this. The debt went up from what we had planned. The allocations, the different sectors of interest also changed. We saw a reduction in the human capital development program that you've seen. And partly that is due to a reducing support from external financing. The health sector is almost, I think, 85% externally supported. So some of that has reduced, which has had a very big impact on the entire budget. So some of these things need to make us think as a government. In the event USAID pulled out, what strategy as a government do we have in place to support the health sector that has been hit the most, if you see? And then finally, I love to ask the question of the current resources that we now have away from what we've now allocated. How are they being used, Felix? This is a question that is usually undermined. The Auditor General's office shows you a number of unabsorbed funds. You're saying we release this money to agro-industrialization, but his report tells you a number of these are unabsorbed. Accounting officers failed to absorb some of these funds. So those are critical questions that, yes, as you plan very well, what do you have in place to make sure that what you've put is able to support and to be absorbed to achieve the allocative efficiency? Those are some of the questions that we pose in a nutshell.
All right. Our time is fast spent. In 30 seconds, Moses, your parting shots, and also in 30 seconds, and even your parting shots.
thank ACFIM for this opportunity that you have provided to me and the other participants in this discussion for us to discuss the national budget. The budgeting process is still on, and I'm sure different stakeholders will be giving their proposals. I hope the executive and parliament will be able to listen to these proposals, especially from our colleagues like Inebiona and others who are in the civil society, including ACFIM, CSBAG, and many others who have scrutinized the national budget and given a number of very good proposals which can help our economy to be turned around. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you too. And even your parting shots?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ACFIM. Once again, it's always a pleasure to come and share. I wish the time would be more so that we can dig into these issues more in depth. Nevertheless, Felix and the listeners, especially the members of parliament that are listening, the policymakers, the response to the crisis for economic recovery and growth calls for doing things in unconventional ways. We can't do things business as usual. Therefore, it's important that as we get into the next planning process, it's not yet late. There are things that we can revise and make sure that our budgets are efficient. That, for example, all the recommendations that have been put by the Auditor General's report, just let's begin with one of 2020. Sit down, have actionable plans of how these things will be reported. Otherwise, we'll keep on planning. The money will not be absorbed. The money will be misused. Strengthen the public infrastructure management system as well. That all the investments we make, let's increase the yield we get, really. The debts are increasing and they're not going any lower. Revenue is not going any higher. Let's put in place and strengthen our legal system that will allow us to utilize the funds that we have in place. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was Inebiona, me, and then I had Mulondo with me, Moses Mulondo. We were discussing the hits and misses, looking at the budget framework paper for 2022-2023. Your host, Felix Kafuma. Thank you for being part of this discussion. Till next week, bye-bye, stay safe.